Welcome everyone to our June coffee hour organized by the Peace, War, and Social Conflict section of ASA. We try to do these once a month. If you're interested in presenting at a future event, I'll put my email address in the chat. You can get in touch with me. Today, Dr. Louis Krisberg is joining us from Syracuse University to talk about his new book, Fighting Better. We'll start with his talk and then move on to the Q&A. But without further ado, welcome, Dr. Krisberg. And also, I will share in the chat the photo of the book. You can start.
Okay.
We just lost your video.
Yeah, what happened?
Not sure. Could you?
I didn't.
Do you see that
I'm
little,
more audible, but yeah, my picture just.
at the bottom of your screen, do you see a camera icon?
Oh yeah, somehow or other. Maybe that's
Perfect.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm back. Okay. I'm delighted to see a number of people. It was names I recognize. Let me just begin with a brief overview of the book, Fighting Better. It has a simple organization for sociologists anyway. It's looking at conflicts along three major societal dimensions: class, status, and power. And I've tried to relate an analysis of the conflicts since 1945 till the present, and make judgments about ones which are constructive and ones which were and are destructive in varying degrees and over time and blended. I'll make clearer the criteria in the course of discussing some of the conflicts, but the idea of constructive conflict has been developing over many years, and Bruce Dayton and I have written some editions of the book. The first edition came out in 1998, and the idea is that it makes important use of certain characteristics of all conflicts, which are pursued by not only coercion, but by persuasion and even reward. The reward may turn out to seem like a bribe, but it is also the recognition that there is some common interest that may be available that would make the conflict constructive rather than destructive. And the many notions about social conflict which recognize it as a social construction that people make about some aspect of their relationship, which they label and regard as a conflict. Or at least one side may, and the other is not recognized as such. And there are also the idea of latent conflicts. So that's a very audacious project to think of whipping that off in a few years. And it's not the area that I had done so much research on. I'd been focused more on peace studies and international conflicts. But I'd lived through the conflicts that I'll talk about. having lived a long time, I can relate to all the kind of conflicts that have existed since 45, and I grew up obsessed with the wars that I was experiencing as a young teenager. I had scrapbooks about the wars in Spain, the Civil War, and the Japanese War in China, and the rising of fascism and Nazism in Europe. And I was somehow determined that I was going to do something about that it was necessary. And I went to the University of Chicago College and discovered sociology. And I loved it. It was just the way I thought about things. And I was very excited at this discovery. And I figured, well, the answer to my question must lie there. And I was very disappointed to find that many of my colleagues in sociology were not so interested in that. I remember at one sociology meeting, one colleague said, "I'm glad you're doing that." And I felt, oh shit, I'm supposed to be the angel for good and you can do other stuff. But gradually I discovered that I was not alone. There were people in other disciplines and in sociology who were discovering conflict resolution, which was evolving, and I could be part of that new field, and that became the basis for my audacious undertaking. So I begin with class. There are 3 chapters on class. In the beginning, there was immediately after World War II, an interest in the economy was growing. There was an interest by political leaders in reducing poverty. The war on poverty that was undertaken was laughed at by Republicans, saying, oh, look, they went through money at the war on poverty and we still have poverty. Well, that war on poverty in just a few years reduced poverty from 22% to 11%. And it never went up to 20 again. You know, it did reduce poverty. And it was done with the participation of people being organized from the ground up, and also with encouragement in the early Johnson years as president, when participation of the poor in the administration of the welfare program was developed, and Syracuse University, as a matter of fact, was one of the first schools to have a program in community organizing for among and for poor people. And even that, which was also ridiculed at the time by some people, has endured. In all across the country, there are programs of welfare which do engage people who are in poverty. Public housing usually is now or has organized of the tenants, and it's taken as a matter of course, and therefore not even contested or not, but not even given credit. And the rhetoric is that you can't solve these problems by just throwing money at them. Yes, you can. Reduce poverty by that, and that is an action which has been contested all along. There are 3 chapters on this. I go on in the first chapter on the war and poverty and how well that, or poorly that was done, and also to the growing power of the trade unions and the growth of, despite Taft-Hartley and other attempts to reduce their power, they grew. Second and third chapters tell a somewhat different story. The second is the beginning of the change, culminating, the real change occurring, say, in 1980. But in the prospect, there was conservative think tanks and interpretations which made Reagan appear as an amiable man who was doing good things. Actually, at the time, most people thought he was an amiable man, but most people were not happy with the policies. But he seemed like a real nice guy. But he certainly weakened the trade unions. He tried to weaken welfare programs by emphasizing that there's corruption. Corruption, imagine. The third chapter analyzes the extraordinary inequality in class that we suffer from now. Such severe inequality has many bad effects inherently. I write a lot about that. And give some of these things do have personal anecdotes, which has become more customary in writing nowadays, and is fun for the author and some readers, I think. The second theme on status, and here I have a couple chapters on African Americans and the rise of increasing status, reducing status inequality that existed in 45 and for many years after, and of course more intensively even earlier. And it looks at the many ways in which the civil rights struggle was changed the status, and for many people there has been progress, but there is still much progress to be made. And then I have a chapter on collective identities and focusing a lot on the women's movement and the rise, the spectacular cultural change involved in the place of women in American society. Again, as a male, I experienced that, but as one who, as many men did, understand that there were some mutual benefits to be derived by breaking the stereotypical role limitations of being masculine or being feminine. I know in the generation of my sons, they spend a lot more time with their kids than my generation did. And that was part of, it was understood by many of the feminist leaders, not all, there were some others, but like Karen DeCrow, who was a leader in Syracuse and a national leader of now that kind of push that value that the feminist thought would generate, and the direct actions that were taken by women to enhance their status and becoming more and more equal, at least in their status. And on other collective identities, and the third theme on power, it focuses on political power and operates with a big distinction between collective and distributive power. Collective being where people may have arguments about how to increase their collective power as a collectivity, or they are looking for increasing power for themselves at the price of others. And I think whatever the language, there's a lot of discussion of the change in the political parties in America, which became step by step more ideologically more homogeneous as the Southern whites left the Democratic Party and joined the Republican. And with that, there did seem to be this deterioration of winning for party gain at the price of the collectivity. And that was very clearly associated with the great class inequality, which was not so identifying as that somehow or other, the ideology of, well, if the rich get more money, they will invest it, and therefore the economy will flourish and all will benefit, instead of everybody having to pay taxes. Of course, this is utter nonsense. Wealthy people use their money to get more wealth. The economy has generally grown when Democrats have been in power, and not so much at all when Republicans have been in power. There's lots of data about the falseness of this trickle-down theory, but that has become dogma for many people, and leading to what I would consider many destructive conflicts. Finally, I'm going to try to finish so I can get your questions and we could talk about this. In the final 10th chapter, I look at possible ways to fight constructively about a lot of different issues along class status and power lines. And there's an abundance of ideas, an abundance of people working on some of these matters to change the structure, to fight the good fights, and to fight them better. So I recommend, if you don't read anything else, just read the 10th chapter and act on it. I'll close this introduction remark by quoting the last paragraph of the last chapter. Let's see. The deterioration in American political life has occurred over many years. Recovering a better civic and political life will also take many years. Despite the somber domestic and global challenges that confront the U.S., the well-done conflicts of the past promise that more progress is possible in the future. It is possible if we make it so. So what do you say?
Thank you so much.
Take charge.
Thank you so much for this exciting, inspiring talk. I'm gonna stop the recording now before we move on to the Q&A.